Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us. We're here celebrating Chloé Cooper Jones's memoir, Easy Beauty. Let's give it up for Chloé. Thank you so much. We're also joined tonight by Kevin Nguyen. Give it up for Kevin. I'm Paula. I'm the events coordinator here for Green Apple Books in San Francisco. Thank you all for being here this evening, and thank you to our online audience for joining us wherever you are joining us from. We so appreciate you. I have some very brief business, and then I would like to get to the heart of the matter and the reason we are all here. I'd like to encourage you to check out our full event calendar on our website. I'm a little biased, but I think it's pretty great, especially for the month of May. And we have a pretty great kickoff for May already. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to our two authors for starting this month off really well for us. All of our events are free unless stated otherwise. That being said, and if you've been here before, you have heard me say, please buy books. Please do buy books from us if you can. Also, if you've heard me, or if you've been here before, you've heard me say when you buy books, you not only support us as an independent bookstore, you support the authors who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book. So I can think of at least one book you might want to purchase this evening if you haven't already, but only if you have the means to. Please do not feel obligated, but we appreciate any support you are able to give us. I'm going to tell you about one event that we have coming up. It is tomorrow, Thursday, May 5th. Yasmina Barrera and her translator, Christina McSweeney, are going to be joining us to celebrate her new book, Linea Negra, which is an essay on pregnancy and earthquakes. And not only is it a fantastic book, but I'm mentioning it specifically because we're donating 10% of each copy of Linea Negra sold to the Indigenous Women Rising Foundation, which provides abortion access and also like sexual health education to Indigenous people who can get pregnant in the US and in Canada. So that is just our modest attempt at combating the attack on Roe versus Wade, and we intend to protect the people who are made most vulnerable by the Supreme Court's potential overturning. The fascist no will not win. Please do join us if you can. That is tomorrow. So thank you also for keeping your masks on tonight. We're trying to continue doing events as safely as possible, and we want to give our authors the grace to take theirs off if they want. They have tours ahead of them. So thank you for being mindful of that and for being cool about it. So tonight we're going to celebrate Chloé's event. We're going to have a reading and then a conversation between Chloé and Kevin, and then an audience question and answer portion. And that goes for you too, online people. If you have any questions, we will get to as many as we can by the end of the hour. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the folks that are joining us this evening. First, Kevin Nguyen is the author of the novel New Waves, one of the best books of 2020, according to NPR. He is also a features editor at The Verge and lives in Brooklyn, New York, where he's visiting us from. Isn't that wonderful? And his paperback edition of New Waves comes out in July, so you can pick that up in paperback, which is very exciting. Please do welcome Kevin. And last but certainly not least, Chloé Cooper Jones is a philosophy professor and freelance journalist who was a finalist for a 2020 Pulitzer Prize in feature writing. Her work has appeared in publications including GQ, The Verge, Vice, Book Forum, New York Magazine, The Believer, and has been selected for both the Best American Travel Writing and the Best American Sports Writing. She lives in Brooklyn, New York, and is joining us here in San Francisco, California. Her memoir, Easy Beauty, is the reason we are here tonight. Please join me in welcoming Chloé Cooper Jones.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
You want to read first?
Yeah, I'll read first. I'm going to read just a really short, tiny section of the book. But actually, before I do, I just want to let you know that whether you buy the book or not, I have a little gift for you all. And you can get them, I think, at the counter up there. My friend Laura, who's here, who's a brilliant artist, made this print for me and for the book, and for people that come. And it's a picture of Kansas, which is where I grew up and where Laura and I were good friends. So it's got a lot of meaning. And the book is largely in a dialogue with art, and is in many ways me trying to think about what art and aesthetic beauty can do in terms of changing certain things about myself and my life and my feeling of being present in the world. So it's been a very meaningful thing to me to have some artist friends read the book and then have their own dialogue with it in their form. So I just want everyone to have one. And, if you don't like it, you can throw it away later. We won't know. We won't know, but you should just take one and be like, yeah. Just because that's nice. Okay. Just gonna read. So the short section that I'm going to read is from, the book is in 2 parts, and this is the very beginning of the second part. And the only thing you need to know is that I had spent a lot of time in the first part in Italy trying to change something about myself, a certain type of restlessness that was keeping me pretty absent from my life and my family. And I've come back to Brooklyn, and I'm going to put all my lessons into, action and be the best self that I can be. And of course, it doesn't always work out that way so easily. So days pass all the same. Trash and cans steam in August's humid heat. Petals from rotting blossoms fall from branches, and wind sends them skittering like beetles across the avenues. September brings a sudden chill that strips the trees of their leaves. October's easy skies turn orange with smoke from Canadian wildfires. The last of the leaves die, desiccate on the stem. New York City is loud, stays loud. A bar opens below our apartment, and other people's drunken conversations filter through our bedroom window, distort and invade my dreams. I spend my weekdays at school. Teaching goes well. I'm happy and focused in the classroom when I'm with my students. But later, I sit in my office alone and grade papers, and I lose all my concentration. I am too anxious. Every line I try to read appears out of focus just slightly. I'm not awake, it seems. There's a buzzing in my ears. I'm outside of my body. My awareness functions like a spotlight, selecting a tiny circle of reality. One day in early November, I open my office window and look out at Harlem below. A pigeon shits on the pavement. The air is thick and hits me like a wet rag. Truck wheels scream. I close the window. I find coiled strands of my hair on my office floor. My hair is falling out? My mind drifts out the window until a knock on my door startles me back into my body. It's the dean of my school. I'm in trouble. I'd lost time and missed the faculty meeting again. At night in bed, I hold my phone close enough to kiss it and pull up pictures of faraway places, mountain ranges, waterfalls, railways into cities, streams, beaches. The world reaches for me through the screen. I can't sleep. I'd left Italy hopeful, so hopeful, but I returned to Brooklyn still myself. Knowing I need to change doesn't make it happen. I'd intended to bring home the happiness I'd felt, but I can't hold on to it. I stare above me until I disappear into the black swirling ceiling. The sun rises. It is morning again. Wolfgang's my son. He's, I think, like 7 at this point. Wolfgang scrapes his spoon across the bottom of his breakfast bowl, a shovel on the head of a drum. The smell of yogurt, the sour stink of saliva, tattered light, blunted by buildings, buzzsaws buzzing, screams from the street, feet stomp on metal grates and concrete. Elsewhere, a door exhausts its hinges. Andrew coughs, then sneezes, all explosions. They startle and oppose me. I can't read or write. I can't find a place of rest. Day drones. I resume the performance of normalcy. I cook. I teach my classes. I attempt timely email responses. I hold my son and read him to sleep. I kiss my husband. I see my friends. I eat at restaurants. I go to readings. I go to museums. I move convincingly through my very good life. But in the dark, while my family sleeps, I click on images of temples, jungles, deserts, lakes, and rivers, always far away as possible.
So I think we're one day removed from a month since the publication, which is the last time I saw you, I think.
Or one day under, yeah.
Yeah, one day, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, what's really funny is I'm based in Brooklyn and I'm doing your San Francisco event, and Anna Wiener's here, and she did your Brooklyn event.
Yeah.
Swap. But
Yeah.
the nice thing about doing events on the West Coast is people know how to pronounce my last name. I don't have to tell them.
Yeah, that's right.
So what's this month been like?
This month's been cool. I've been on tour pretty much the whole month. I think I've been in like 12 cities or something like that. I don't know. It's hard to keep track, or I just keep going back to LA, which is great. And being in California, I'm like obsessed. I'm really ready to move here. If anyone has like an apartment or yeah, real estate ideas.
We're in San Francisco right now, so you're supposed to shit on LA.
Well, yeah, but I like it. I like all of California that I have seen. It's like all hits, no misses. Although I've only seen 2 cities, so I don't know. Is there other parts that
Well, let's
are
check
bad?
in with you after like a Sacramento event.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sacramento.
Joan Didion's from there.
Oh yeah,
That's true. Greta
I'll
Gerwig.
go. Greta Gerwig. I saw that movie. Lady Bird. That looks cool. Oh, she wasn't happy though. I don't know. I mean, I just read this section about being in my home in Brooklyn and my office in Harlem, and it's just like loud and pigeons are shitting everywhere and there's like trash everywhere and it's like so intense. So it's like Sacramento seems chill compared to Brooklyn. There's a bar, we've been to this bar a million times below my apartment that's quite loud, and I just get to listen to dumb people say things. It's a great bar. I forgot that we're recorded. It's my favorite bar. But yeah, it seems great here. That wasn't your question, but whenever you talk to me about California, I get distracted.
So I guess it's interesting because a lot of your book is about the way people look at you, the gaze. You're on tour. What has that been like gaze-wise?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was just talking to you and Naomi and Liz about this in the car. Like I had an idea that I had a bad idea that this tour would be more like that I would feel more uncomfortable than I do because I'm putting my body in a public space, which is typically a very uncomfortable thing for me to do, because as a visibly disabled woman, when you put your body in a public space, it's typically like people are staring at you and they're pitying you, or they're like trying to offer you help you don't need. Like I was flying to somewhere, one of these cities, and I was just walking with my luggage and I was by myself and I was kind of like in a good mood. I was kind of feeling myself. I was like, yeah, I'm on book tour. Like I'm doing it. I'm living my dreams. And like, I had like Harry Styles in my headphones and I was like, life is so good. I'm going to LA maybe. And then this like security person was like, slow down, be careful. And I was like, is he talking to me? And he was like, just take your time. He's like, I don't want you to get hurt. And it's like that disconnect is such a strange thing, because in my head, I was feeling so powerful and confident. And then there's that reminder that's always there that like to other people, the visual thing that I seem to project is one of like fragility and inability, which is seems so incongruous in my own mind, especially on tour. But I would just say, like, aside from that one security guard, I think this has been like an incredible experience, and people have been really warm and welcoming, and I think also really open about the parts of the book that they feel connected to or that they resonate with. So it's felt like a very like I get to be part of something and not just like on display.
Well, I'm glad it's been so positive. Doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't, why not?
Well, I will say like my experience of your book, I feel like it came in two phases. The first phase was when it was in galley, and the second phase was when the book came out. And I was just constantly getting text messages from friends about your book and how much they loved it. Like a flurry of them. A lot of them, some of them are here tonight, and they will tell you their text messages later. And I really thought, I'm just like, man, these people didn't text me quite this quickly when my book came out. Like they just whipped right through your book. And I do want to ask about that later. But there are some people in the book, many of whom have pseudonyms, who show up, I would say less flatteringly. Have you heard from any of them?
Yeah. Yeah, but like they know. Like I talked to everybody that's in the book, I think, before, with one exception. So they knew, but I think that I really hope. So the thing, if you haven't read the book, what Kevin's referring to is like throughout the book, I have a lot of conversations with people that, that are like pretty open conversations, and sometimes they go places I don't expect it to. I think, a lot of the experience of disability is that a lot of the prejudice that you experience comes with people's good intentions, by which I mean like that security guard, right? Like that was such a dehumanizing experience for me. It was so uncomfortable and so annoying to be shown, like to see myself reflected back through that guy's eyes as someone who's like weak and incapable. Like that's a very unpleasant experience. But of course, in his head, he sees himself doing a good thing. Like he really thinks he's like helping me. And there's a dissonance with disability where it's like a lot of times the worst moments are ones you also feel uncomfortable calling people on, because they're really trying to do their best for you, but what they're reflecting is their own bad concepts about your body. And that can be very painful in a lot of ways. And so I do just record some of these conversations, and they're in the book, but I really hope that nobody reads this book and sees any of these people as villains. Like my rule was there are no villains in the book. Like every single person has a lot of reasons why they're coming to these bad assumptions, myself included. And that's like the most important thing, is that there's nothing that I'm, frustrated about in other people that I myself am not equally capable of doing to other people. And so my hope is that nobody reads this book and is like, wow, that guy's such an asshole or whatever, but rather like can see why people can do and say really hurtful things, sometimes without meaning it, or sometimes by being, they're not their best selves or whatever. And here's the more cogent thought that I want to say about this. I think also the experience of disability, and this is I think an experience all of us have, is that like in order to get around the world, we live in this like world of strangers. So in order to just move around the world, our brains have to do this one simple thing, which is isolate facts about people, typically a visual fact, and then make quick judgments about that fact, right? Like we just there's no judgment in that. There's no way to survive in this world of strangers without the brain isolating a fact, making a judgment about that fact, and then moving on. And quite often people have that first thought about you, whatever that visual thing is that they've isolated, and they don't have a second or third or fourth thought about you. And that's okay most of the time. But also, we all walk around with those first thoughts that people have about us reflecting back all the time. Like if you're in a public space, you're just seeing that first thought reflected over and over and over again. And for disability, a lot of times that first thought is a negative one. It's a pitying one, or it's a concern, or it's a belief that you're somehow lesser or less capable. And if that's like being reflected back to you over and over again, it's hard not to internalize that. And if those people who reflect their first thoughts back to you don't have second or third or fourth thoughts about you, then that's all you feel and that's all you see. So that's a hard thing for me. And if you felt this way, then it's probably a hard thing for you. So my rule with the book too was nobody in the book gets only a first thought. Anybody who shows up in the book, even if they said a cruel thing to me, I always would give them a second and third and fourth thought, because that's the practice that I really want to always be in, even when the thing that somebody's saying to me is pretty abhorrent or painful, because that's what I really want for myself. So I can't ask that of anybody if I'm not willing to do it. That makes sense?
It does. I mean, it's very generous. It's very empathetic. I'm kind of curious, like I guess it's like when you were writing the book, had you already had these like second or third thoughts about people, or was writing the book kind of a process of thinking through those experiences?
I think both. I mean, I think that the first draft of the book is I'm way less generous. And I think I'm much more concerned with, I don't know, just like the surface event. And I also wrote I think this is common for writers. Like I wrote a more self-protective first draft, which just isn't to say that I came off any better in the first draft. It's that I just didn't want to go into painful things in the first draft. And sometimes giving people that second and third and fourth thought when they've hurt you is a very uncomfortable thing. You don't want to do it. Like I'd much rather just be like, what an asshole, and never think about that person ever again. And I was really lucky. I have this unbelievable editor. I think just one of the greatest editors in the world, book editors in the world. I mean, because you're the best magazine editor in the world.
Thank you. I was going to say.
Yeah. So this is very important to say. This is the best magazine editor. Then I have a great book editor. I'm lucky, very wealthy in editors. Lauren Nguyen, who read my first draft, of course, and she would find these places in the book and she would just be like, you're not telling the truth here. And she would really push me, and I would like write another draft and she'd be like, well, that's closer, but like, you're not willing to really tell the truth yet. And that was such a helpful thing to have someone really look at, like to see those moments on the page when I was retreating, and to sort of push me head first into those things. And I think through her help, I could have those, sort of more complex thoughts about people and myself, obviously.
You and I talk a lot. I mean, we've worked on pieces together, and I feel like the thing we talk the most about is structure. Mm-hmm. And we've actually not had this conversation. I have so many questions about the structure of Easy Beauty. Because on one hand, like there is an overarching, there's an arc that carries throughout the whole book, but it's also nonlinear. And then also each chapter really kind of could be its own standalone essay. So I'm wondering how you did that, because first it sounds very hard. And second, like, how did you balance that? How did you arrange things?
Yeah, I should say Kevin's work. I mean, I learned so much from working with you. I mean, Kevin's in the book. He's one of the few people who come off really well. And
you got a pretty good jab in there.
I did make fun of you a little bit, but in a way I felt like only you would really know I was making fun of you.
And it was true and it was fair. Yeah, we met at a party, and Chloé wanted to talk about tennis, and I'm like a Rafael Nadal fan, so I was like, I bet you like Federer, which is true.
Which I do, because he's the best. Roger Federer, you know him? But, the best tennis player, male tennis. Go on.
No, I think that was it. Wait, we worked on.
No, he was like, "Oh, you're so basic." Like, oh, he was drunk. Like, he was like, "Oh, you're so basic," and you're like Roger Federer. And then I was like, "Who do you like?" And he's like, "Nadal." And I was like, "Oh, that's so original." Like, that's like being like, "Oh, you like chocolate ice cream," but I like vanilla. Like, it's like it's so. But yeah, so I make fun of you.
We became friends anyway.
We sure did. It worked out. And he's one of the few people whose real name is in the book, because I was like, he won't sue me. So wait, what was your question? Oh, structure. Well, so I should just say Kevin and I worked on a lot of pieces together. We worked on all my tennis pieces that I wrote for GQ. We've done a lot of film things and just like different reviews. But I wanted to write this very different piece, this very ambitious piece. And it was a piece I had never done. And it involved going up to spend a lot of time in a prison with this man, Ramsey Orta, who had filmed the death of his friend, Eric Garner. And I took it and I wanted to do it in kind of an unusual way, and write this piece in a kind of, unstructured, different, not a linear way. And Kevin was like, yeah, we'll just do it. We'll just absolutely do it. And I think like, and you really put me through my paces and like forced me to think about structure in a lot of ways. But I think like the first step to the book and like the sort of strange structural choices that I make in the book is like having that belief really early on when I was really trying to mess with structure and think about different ways of storytelling, like you being able to just have my back and all of that, I think gave me sort of a permission to, play a little bit more ambitiously in this book.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we're pals.
You also fidget like crazy on the line level, I would say. I know you did that a lot with this book.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like, how did you know when to stop? And actually, did you know when to stop?
No. Well, because I'm really mad about the galleys. So do you guys know this, that like people print galleys really early?
Galleys are like advanced
Galleys
copies.
are like advanced copies, and this really annoying thing happens, which is like, if my editor's watching, where they print your galley from an early draft. And I was so neurotic about this. I hated that so many of my good friends and journalists and like people who reviewed the book, like all read these galleys, because I could have, I could find these typos, or I could find these sentences that weren't perfect, or I could find these things that felt like, bad repetitions. And I was so, I just felt really anxious to write and rewrite and rewrite. And I think in a year, I'll look back at this book and probably hate all the sentences. This is not a good sales pitch. But I think that's just very normal. I think you're just constantly learning how to write better and better sentences. And so I think one of the most interesting revision things is I read the audiobook. So if you get the audiobook, it's me. And that was the most amazing thing, because when I'm writing sentence, I'm really, really paying close attention to sounds. And I want every sentence to do specific things in the minds of readers. So sometimes I'll choose like very percussive sounds within a word because I want to amplify a tension in your mind, because that's what's fitting the scene. Like it's a tense scene, so I'll use, a harder glottal stop in my sentences, or I'll use more staccato, rhythms. I'll cut the sentences shorter and shorter and shorter so that it creates sort of a rhythm in your mind. And I think sometimes we don't always like consciously pick up on these things, but I do think that a lot of times when we're appreciating art, it's like the things that we're receiving subconsciously and the ways that these things are hitting our mind orally. There's like one particular thing, I don't think I haven't told you this, but at the very beginning of the book, I don't know if I told anybody this. At the very beginning of the book, I described this thing called the neutral room. And the neutral room is this place, this sort of abstracted space in my mind that I go to sort of avoid reality, to dissociate from reality, but also to dissociate from like mental or emotional pain. It's just that like locked space. And I was taught about this space from a doctor who helped me with like pain management. So my disability comes with a chronic pain disorder. So he was like, look, the mind can feel pain, and that's just imagined pain. The mind can feel it and send it through your body. So one pain management technique, and I've learned later that like distance athletes do a similar thing, is they find like you find a space in your mind, everything else is like disappears, and then you count to a certain number. So my number is 8. So I count to 8. So if I have to walk a long distance and I'm worried about how painful that'll be, I don't think about the mile that I have to walk in Brooklyn or like the long subway commute. I just think, or the long like aisles of all these airports that I've been in. I just think I'm only doing this for 8 seconds, right? I'm only in pain for 8 seconds. Anybody can survive pain for 8 seconds. Then the 8 seconds stops, and then it restarts, and it stops and it restarts. So when I first introduced that concept in the first chapter of this book, in this chapter called The Berninis, I talk about that, and then I count to 8 in the book. And then for the next full paragraph, every single sentence has 8 syllables. So it just, nobody will ever notice this, right? Like, but for me, it's like, I'm just asking you to do an 8 count with me. And even if you don't have a conscious experience of it, I'm still, to a certain extent, like pulling you into the neutral room with me. And I do think, we hear sentences in our minds, even if we're not reading them out loud. So there's little things like that all through the book where my hope is that it doesn't matter if they hit people explicitly, but I just want to create as much texture as possible with my sentences, and also give people a reason to reread the book someday, hopefully, and find those little hidden things.
Are there other little hidden things? Or do we have to find them?
Well, I'll tell you one other one. I mean, one other hidden thing is, so in philosophy, there's a lot of aesthetic, there's actually not that much aesthetic philosophy. I've got these reviews where people are like, oh my God, the philosophy in this book, but it's actually like very minimal. It's like, I actually like went and made a Word document with all the philosophical stuff, and it's like 3 pages. It's really not that much, but there is this, sort of thread of aesthetic philosophy. I studied philosophy and taught philosophy for many years. And in philosophy, a very commonly known analogy comes from probably originally from Plato's allegory of the cave, is that the sun represents truth, right? So in the allegory of the cave, you're in the cave of ignorance, you get pulled out of the cave of ignorance by a good teacher, and then you stand in front of the sun, which is a metaphor for the truth. At first, when you look at the sun, it's very painful, it hurts your eyes, but if you stand in the truth, the sun of the truth or whatever, for long enough, your eyes adjust and you can see for a great distance. And so the allegory of the cave is this idea that, and throughout philosophy, this analogy of the sun is the truth is painful, but is also illuminating and helps you see further and know more. So every single description of the sun in this book is referencing sort of where I'm at in my journey. So at the very beginning of the book, I'm in Rome and the sun is always like abrasive, or it's like beating down on me, or it's like evaporating my plate. It's like a very aggressive, every description of the sun is aggressive. Or when I'm sort of like confused about ideas, the sun is doing different things. And then by the end of the book, the sun is, much more peaceful, and it's like encompassing myself and my family. So this, every single description of the sun bears a reference to my mental state or my relationship to the truth of that, or the thing that I want to be changed in me at that moment. Do you think that's cool or not?
I think that's pretty cool.
That's kind of cool, right?
Yeah, it's deep. And I don't think anyone will ever catch it.
No one will catch it. But you might feel it, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're like, if the sun is awful, then you might feel tense when you're reading that. And anyway, I mean, I think of it like music. Like when I actually learn about producers and the incredible amount of texture that like a really good producer puts into a track, a really complex track, like my ear can't pick out each one of those things, but when I hear it all together, it's, it's so layered. It's like the sonic experience. And if you took one of those tracks out, it would feel wrong. So I think even when we can't, I don't know, maybe I'm just doing it for myself, actually, I have no idea, but I like doing it. You have to read the book so many times.
Yeah, and it also just gives a lot of people different entry points for what they take from it. So this is a while ago, but someone was like, oh yeah, like they read the book and they're like, it's like Chloe's like such a good writer, like considering, and then I like thought where they were gonna go with that, like considering what, that she's disabled, a mother, Filipina, or in Wolfgang's words, jalapeno,
yeah.
And then said, oh no, she's like, considering that she has a PhD in philosophy because no academics can write. And I just thought that was true. Like a lot of academic writing is very stilted, but I feel like academia has actually informed your writing in a very different way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, academic writing is technical writing. So it's meant to ideally, give like it's really not that different in a way from like a technical manual or something. It's really intended to give you a tool, which is typically an idea or a theory or a term that then becomes a tool to help you understand a complicated thing. So I think academic writing really does have more in common with like car auto fixing book. I don't even know what that's called. What do you call those?
Like a manual?
Yeah, like some sort of manual for people who fix things, not me, obviously. Than it does with like creative writing. But I think for me, academia, like I just really felt like the best writing that I had read came from people who had really spent a lot of time building foundations of knowledge and then being able to stand on those foundations and see a great distance. And I wanted to read as widely as possible, and I wanted to think as much as possible about what other people had written and read. But then I also think academic philosophy is kind of an incredible training ground for a writer, because basically what academic philosophy says is we're going to aim at truth, but we're never going to get there. We're never going to figure anything out. And in fact, if philosophers figure things out, they're kicked out to a completely different discipline. So like when Pythagoras figured out, the hypotenuse of a triangle, it's not philosophy anymore. He was a philosopher first, but it's not philosophy anymore. Now it's geometry. Or when people figured out, astronomy, it wasn't the realm of philosophy anymore. It became the realm of science. And so this has been true for a lot of years. And philosophers are always sort of on this path of trying to seek this thing of widening an idea that is impossible to ever fully understand. So for example, Socrates walks around going, what's truth? And what does it mean to be good? What does it mean to be a good person? What is justice? What is friendship? What is love? And of course we can never fully answer those questions, but I really admire the pursuit of just trying to widen a person's concept of an idea. That's it. It's like, you think you know what truth is, you think you know what justice is, and Socrates comes along and stretches that concept just a little bit. And I think that's an incredible thing that art does as well. So art and philosophy are really aligned, or a lot of other academic disciplines have that same aim of just widening your ideas just a little bit, not forcing you into a false dichotomy or forcing you into a constricted notion of what is or isn't true, but just stretching an important thing in your mind. And that's such a gift. Like when I experience that in fine art or in music or in theater or in film, I'm so grateful for that. I'm just so amazed by that when an artist can just show me something I thought I knew in a broader sort of way. And I think the best literature does that. And so for me, I took this concept of beauty and all I wanted to do was turn the concept over and over and over in my mind so that me and the reader together, there's no perfect answer in this book about what beauty is or what beauty should mean in our lives. But I do think there's just this attempt to take that very important concept and all the ways that beauty can be thought of and just stretch it a little bit. And that seems worthwhile to me. And I think it's something that academic work taught me how to think that way.
Yeah. There's a moment in the book where your mother, actually, no, I want to start with this. It comes after this really great little scene where you get permanently banned from the Girl Scouts.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why is, well, young Chloe realizes that she can break up a bunch of boxes of cookies and make variety packs of Girl Scout cookies, which I still think is a great idea.
And then sell them at school for more money.
For more money, and she's pocketing the money. And then, a bunch of things happen, you get in trouble, you get caught. And then after that, it's your mother. She basically tells you oh, well, just play the disability card to protect yourself, and it's kind of this inversion of what happens in the first scene. I guess a lot of the book too, Chloe, the character, is confronting people and having conversations, and it can be really hard to read sometimes because it's you just know that the person is about to do something harmful or painful or say something harmful and painful, and Chloe is trying to decide how generous to be and how much to listen and then how much to protect herself. And I guess through that, do you feel like you become a more accepting person of listening to people, or more protective?
Well, certainly I think we're always, all of us, in that duality. And I think that moment where my mother says oh, just play your card, she says look, people are not, she's the person who says first, people are going to have a first thought about you and not a second one. So know what that first thought is, and then know how to manipulate it. And that's genius. And like all of us do that, I think, but it's also really feeding into people's, you become complicit in people's worst ideas. If you know what people's prejudices are, if you know the way that they're going to respond to you, that gives you a great power. And my mother just wanted to protect me, and I didn't really understand how painful that is until I became a parent, because for myself, I can go, well, no, I don't want to play the disability card, or I don't want to actually codify and reinforce people's first and worst ideas about me. But I can say that for myself. But when it comes to my son, I want to give him the same advice. I want to like wrap him in bubble wrap and just like keep him from any sort of cruelty in the world. And that's such a horrible reality of parenthood, is that you have to figure out how to not do that. Like your absolute strongest instinct is to like just protect your kid from the eyes of others. And the hardness of strangers. And yet that's literally the worst thing you can do. It's so hard. I have some friends here who are parents, and like, yeah, some with new babies, so you'll figure it out. But I think that the core struggle of the book is exactly what you're talking about. And I think it's a struggle that I hope feels very relatable to people, which is, again, it kind of goes back to this neutral room. So the neutral room for me, when I sort of retreat from reality, it's both a source of great agency because it's peace. And sometimes like retreating from reality gives us strength and is an extremely important thing for us to do so that we can then take on hard things. But of course, retreat also can have this threshold in which it becomes a overly self-protective form of being in the world, or becomes even a way of withdrawing from difficult situations that in fact we should deal with, right? So for me, a lot of the struggle or the battle of the book is trying to figure out how to stay on the right side of that threshold, like when to just give myself like peace and grace and agency and withdraw, but when to also know that that self-protective instinct not only can make me complicit in some of people's worst thoughts, but just keeps me from like being present in the world with others, and actually holds me back from the kinds of beauty I want to experience the most, which is like the love of my family, the love of my friends, the experience of feeling present here with all of you. It's very easy, and it's like, it's a very anxiety causing thing to like look at all your faces and know you're looking at me and like to talk. People say like their worst fears. It's like, do you know the number one worst fear that people have? Public speaking. And death is too. Like, that's wild. Like, people are more afraid of what I'm doing right now, or maybe what some of you do all the time, than dying. Like, that's so wild. So there is this part of me right now that really wants to just go on autopilot and shut myself up in a dissociated remove, which I can do. But the more of me wants to be here and to like look at you and to like experience this, even though that is far harder and is a much more vulnerable making thing. So I think that constant balance, like that's when I think we're negotiating, all of us, like minute to minute, not only just like in our whole lives, but like minute to minute. And I don't think I'm any better at this than anyone else is, but I think the book is my attempt to really look at my instinct to withdraw and see if I can get into a better balance with it. And my hope is that all of you, if you read it, that's a valuable thing for you all to like spend 288 pages sort of thinking about that in yourself, or how you balance that in yourself, or what your own like neutral room is, which I think everybody has one. What's yours? I have a guess, but what do you have? You have your own neutral room. Like, where do you go to retreat from the discomfort of reality?
That's a good question. I think I'm just like outside my body,
Yeah.
kind of looking down, which it sounds like I'm dead. So maybe
That is,
number
but it
two.
is sort of like being dead, right? Like when you dissociate like that. But do you do a specific thing when you're like, this day sucked, or like this thing is hard? It's video game, probably.
It's
right?
probably video games, yeah.
But then video.
I was gonna say literature, and then you obviously knew the correct answer. This
Well,
is why you don't do
literature
events with people you know really well.
No, literature too. But I mean, I think that's like probably a lot of the people in this room are readers, are obsessive readers. And it's like, well, why did you become an obsessive reader? Well, probably because being alone in your own mind was the safest place for you.
Mhm.
And that is a place of tremendous agency and has probably given you some of the greatest things that you have. Certainly has given me some of the greatest things that I have, is the ability to be locked up in my own mind. But there's always a threshold in which that becomes a coping mechanism or a deflecting mechanism or an avoidance of reality mechanism. And yeah, I just think that threshold's interesting. I mean, being alive with other people, man, it's hard. It's so hard.
On that note, I would love to open it to audience questions. If anyone's got one.
Yeah. Anyone have a question?
Yes, I can't see. Oh,
It's
Zoe.
Hi, Zoe.
I'm curious, the part of the book
Mhm.
and the experience of your now are like, or to me, that is very grand. Like the kestrel to you is not going to cut it at that point. And I'm curious if that and why it felt like it needed to be some artist thing versus like what you're saying right now.
Yeah, that's such a good question, Zoe. So part of the thesis that I'm trying to test in this book is this idea from Iris Murdoch that she calls unselfing. So her idea is that if you want to change a concept, you could look to beauty, and that like the experience of beauty can help you change certain things in yourself. So the reason she thinks this is because beauty necessarily forces you outside of, and this is her phrase, your own fat, relentless ego, right? Like we're all sort of stuck in our own minds. And she says, when you're sort of distracted by beauty or engaging in beauty, you necessarily have to exit your own mind and engage either in the natural world or in a world of other minds or in art or whatever it is, performance. And that gives you a break from yourself. It gives you a break from like the palace of self-regard that we're stuck in most of our lives. And she thinks that this experience of beauty can change you. So every single chapter of the book, as I'm seeking change, I'm looking to see if experiences of beauty will do that. And Zoe's absolutely right. Like so many of these experiences are quite grand. The book begins with me, feeling I have to go to Rome and like look at Bernini sculptures, and look at some of the most famous examples of art. But I think as the book goes on, I try very hard to, first of all, like find beauty in places that surprise me, but also to, as the book moves, especially back to Brooklyn, to find it in my friends, to find it in like much more simple pleasures. The very last chapter of the book finds me like enjoying just like the first perfect night of New York fall, or being at a party with my friends, Kevin being one of them. I'm like, oh, he buys me a drink. It's great. But the very, very end of the book is just me trying to write with the exact same awe and reverence as I do about the Berninis. I try to write about the experience of just listening. The very last paragraph is just me listening to my husband making coffee in the morning and trying to feel, my hope is that the bookends sort of show this journey of being able to see this more easy, everyday beauty. And I try to show that just through writing with the same awe that I do when I write about the Berninis. But I think that certainly is my like very personal struggle, which maybe some people share this struggle, is that it's so much easier for me to justify or give credence to or give reverence to beauty that's like completely indifferent to me, like a Bernini sculpture. Like it doesn't care about me. It's not alive. Like it doesn't think about me. Like it doesn't rely on me. So I can be like, it's so beautiful, important. But the people who are not indifferent to me, or the situations that are not indifferent to me, to internalize that beauty is so complex and complicated and nuanced and difficult that it was much harder for me to give that respect and reverence to. So the book is trying to get there. And I think at the very last bit, I do. Does that make sense?
Any other questions? Yes, back here.
Yeah, I'm curious, you mentioned like some of the people who don't come out so well in the book necessarily, although not villains, but
No villains, yeah.
I'm curious what the process looked like for you, kind of as you were writing these various drafts, and whether you felt conflicted at all at any point about what you owed those people, or whether you had conversations with any of them, or showed them pages, or just like pseudonym and screw you, or what navigating that was like for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's such a good question. It is really hard to navigate those things. And it is also hard to write about other people and to write about harder moments with other people. But I mean, I think it's really crucial to have, and this was like, not to bring a dead philosopher into it, but like the core of Kant's, ethical theory is that all people have inherent human dignity and that you can't make any ethical decisions without that being your core belief. So even people who are doing these things that are hurtful or are complicated or have a painful effect, whether they've intended it to have that effect or not, those people are all worthy of inherent human dignity. And so to write about them, I have to be very careful not to dehumanize them. Like another one of Kant's rules is you can never use another person as means to your end. So these people that I wrote about could never just be means to my end. Like they could never just be like butts of jokes or whatever, or me trying to make a point about, people and disability. They always had to be like full, autonomous, real people who made mistakes. And then I make a lot of mistakes too. So I think the process of that was just me trying to think like, if this person isn't a monster, if this person has inherent human dignity, what is the thing they're actually trying to communicate? And they're doing it badly, they're doing it hurtfully, but like, what is the thing they're trying to say? And more often than not, the thing they were trying to say was, I'm in a lot of pain. They were like, I'm in pain and you look weird. And so you must be in worse pain than me. And that seems worse, right? Like they'd be like, I'm depressed and unhappy and in pain and suffering. And you're walking funny. So at least I'm not that, right? Like it would be these sort of bad syllogisms. And once you can kind of see things from that perspective, you can give people that, that space to be imperfect and to be in pain. And a lot of the things also that I try to think about in this book is what it means to allow your pain to spill on to other people, and how desperately I didn't want my pain to spill onto my family and like stain my family. But the only way to avoid that is to live a very separate life from your family. So part of the growth in the book for me as well is like allowing myself to spill a little bit of my own pain onto the people that I love, which seems like a counterintuitive thing in terms of trying to be good, but it's actually just the necessary thing of being actually intimately close to anybody, is that you're going to spill your shit on them, like that's what it means to really like love people and be close to them and like be a part of this human project, which I so desperately want to be a part of. So yeah, I think it was just trying to think about those things, but it definitely doesn't happen right away, right? Like your first instinct is typically I hate that person, but that's a dodge. That's all. Whenever you're like, oh, fuck that person or whatever, like that's always a dodge. That's never, it's never like a true expression.
So you're going to sign some books.
Unless it's Djokovic.
Unless it's Novak Djokovic.
Unless it's Novak Djokovic, in which case you'd be like, fuck that person. And then need any other thoughts? It's a tennis joke again. We can't stop. Okay.
But before we sign some books, let's do one last question.
Oh yeah, does anyone else have one? It's okay if nobody does. So. Doesn't Birdie have a question? Birdie's, what's happening with Birdie? Maybe we need to ask Birdie a question. Is Birdie okay? Does Birdie have to go home? Is this not the cutest dog in the whole universe? I just wanted to see Birdie. Well, yeah, we can just hang out, and I'm gonna sign books if you want me to, and we'll talk to people. Oh, my baby. But thank you for coming, and I really hope you'll get one of these.
Yeah,
art
these prints are
prints.
beautiful.
That's my friend Laura who made them. Oh, maybe Laura will sign your. Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you all for coming out. Let's give it up for Chloé Cooper Jones.